Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Laura and Leonie's Systemic Stories. I'm Laura, and Leonie's with me, and we've got the wonderful Anne Holloway joining us today.
Hi, everyone. And today we are very excited to be speaking with Anne. Anne is a family therapist in private practice, AHA counselling, and provides relationship and family counselling, family sensitive practice, supervision, and training. And she's the president of the Australian Association of Family Therapy, which is our peak body for family therapy in Australia. And a big thanks to Anne coming to us from Perth, Western Australia, keeping in mind a little time difference. So, welcome, Anne.
Hello, Leonie. Hello, Laura. It's lovely to see you. Yeah, this is a real honor. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm very curious about how we might do this podcast. I think it's something we should do more of in this contemporary space. I think it's interesting. Everyone listens to podcasts these days. So, yeah, thanks for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I think maybe in terms of like doing the podcast, so one of the things that we kind of first like to do is just get to know our guests a little bit. So I guess we would just say, obviously, we've met you through AFT and through conferences, and kind of really interested in finding out a little bit more about yourself. And we normally ask, like, how did you first get introduced to systemic ideas? So do you think that would be a good place to start? A bit about you and your entry into systemic family therapy?
Yeah, I had to think about that, and I was thinking, now where do I start with that? We often say that well, our training begins many years ago, in our own families. And I thought, do I start with my own family? Because that's where the first introduction is, really, to some extent. Um, lived in two countries when I was up to age of 14, both in Malaysia and the UK, and my father's English, my mother's Burmese. And then at 14, we migrated to Perth, WA.
Mm.
And I had a pretty idyllic life up to then, but coming here, migrating, was the first time the family actually experienced quite a lot of hardship
Mm.
and what impact it had on us as a family, because we were only our own family and had no extended family, was that we really became very knitted, close knitted, bonded, supported each other. And that still really stays today. So it had a profound effect. It also changed my parents a lot in terms of my mother then became the worker, my dad was more at home. And so that shift in roles was something that was really challenging and struggling for them, but we all came through it really well.
Mm.
So, and I found that having that experience and then going to university and learning a little bit about in sociology that other people also have difficulties in life was the first time I started to think I wanted to do social work and I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
So I did a first degree first and then did 2 years undergraduate social work at UWA. And it was there that was introduced, of course, first to systems theory, because we always did systems theory in social work. And we did also group work and community development work.
Mm.
So we were already in the understanding of what a system was, and more than just the family, it was society as well and communities. So I think that's where I was first introduced to the idea. And as a family, we were all studying at the time at university. We'd have discussions around the dinner table, and they'd always talk about problems in the world. And my brothers and sisters say, well, Anne will say it's the system. It's the problem with the system.
I love
Well, I
that.
meant the economic, political, social system.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're starting it already without realizing that it was there. And then I really came across it first when after working in child protection for quite a few years, I managed to be employed at the Princess Margaret Hospital, which was the children's hospital in Perth. It's now Perth Children's Hospital. And I was designated the neonatal ward in cardiology, genetic counselling. And across all of that, there were babies and children, of course, who died. And so parents were dealing with massive loss and grief. So that was the first time I really started to do some kind of counselling. In child protection, there wasn't so much of that, it was more community work. And then, which, lo and behold, Malcolm Robinson came over and facilitated a 1 day workshop. So I was an employee at the time, so I went to that. Um, And it was interesting. I started to get an understanding, a little bit of systems theory. Like Malcolm is very good at the theoretical side. I did like his idea of therapeutic letters. So I started using therapeutic letters in my work with parents who had lost children. So that was my first introduction. Then I ended up in a community health centre in a regional town called Busselton. And up to then, I had kind of specialised a little bit, through child protection, family domestic violence, then the loss and grief with children. But in that, I had, and one day I would have a young parent come in to talk about her issues with her 3 or 4 year old in parenting. Then I'd have a man in his 50s say, oh, his wife had left him and he wasn't doing very well. To another woman who was dealing with her parents dying of cancer. I was thinking, I don't know what to do here. Like this is, I can't be an expert in all these issues. So that's made me start to think about what do I need? What skill base do I need to be able to do this position? I also did a lot of group work as well, like personal growth, stress management, parenting. And it was Andrew Ralph came down and he did a 1 day workshop. Andrew Ralph is quite well known in Perth as a family therapist. He had worked at Warwick, child and adolescent mental health. And he came down and did 1 day workshop, which was interesting. And then Aldo Gagoni came down, I think, the
Yeah.
next year and did at least 1 to 2 days, I think. But it was watching Aldo do experiential work that made me think, yes, that's it for me. That's what I want to do. Because his presence was gentle, real, human, never put anybody down. If we were telling him about a case we were working with, he would work with it very beautifully. So you would just get the message about what you needed to do without actually being told directly what to do. So, of course, I then enrolled into the 1 week intensives that he was running. So that would have been about 1992. And then I was actually, um, I was a disciple by then into family therapy and systems. And so I did the 2 year training in 93, 94, and then 2 years supervision after that. So that's when I was exposed. And I made the decision then in 94 that I would do private practice because I recognised that in government agencies it was limited in being able to work systemically, and that's where I wanted to do. So I set myself up as a relationship and family therapist in that year. I'd been about 10 years experience then as a social worker, so I was fairly solid in what I was doing. So I felt quite confident to go into private practice. And yes, and it just took off. So I've been doing that ever since alongside many other things. But
Oh, I love that introduction that you've had, Anne. What a so many names in there, so many different ways of thinking about how you want to work. And I love that you found this landed on systems thinking to help you with that. Tell me a little bit about what that looks now. Are you still seeing such the variety of clients, the 50-year-old man, the young parent, and
mm,
yeah, tell me what it
mm.
looks like now.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Laura. Funnily enough, I do have a variety, and that's what I do like about private practice. So I will still get many teenagers with anxiety and depression, and then couples. So I do a lot of couple therapy, and I really enjoy couples work. And that's always very different. Each couple is really unique and different, so I enjoy that. Um, to sometimes I have the adult son or daughter wanting to work with their parents
Mhm.
through issues that occurred in the past and they want to be able to reconcile that and have a better relationship with their parents. So I do quite a bit of that. I don't see young children a lot as much, but when I have, I've often, if they're 3, 4, I did a bit of play therapy in CAM when I was working in child and adolescent mental health. And so I often refer the younger ones to play therapy for individual work, but I will see the whole family from time to time. So, but it's definitely gone more into the mental health because I did work in adult mental health and child and adolescent mental health, and I'm an accredited mental health social worker. When it first began, really, I was able to be accepted as I'd worked in that field. So I just so have drifted towards more of that. And then of course the neurodiverse now as well.
Yeah.
I get a lot of the ADHD and neurodiverse, teenagers and adults as well, particularly adults in relationships. That's fascinating with one who has ADHD. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I don't know what it's like in Western Australia, but over here in Queensland, in my private practice, and when I talk with other clinicians and trainees, especially people going through psychology programs, because it's very kind of a different focus than family therapy and very sort of individual. And then whether clients are coming under a mental health care plan or just coming along, I often find there's that first piece of work of trying to get people to think systemically. Although it's definitely easier in private practice because they see your website and what you're coming along for. But I guess I was really curious when people come as individuals or when they're sort of presenting their teenagers, what what sort of challenges are there, or sort of what's your process around bringing in the systemic lens?
Mm. That's a good question. Look, I'll tell you, as a young lass that I had, she was 15 when she came, and it was for anxiety. Her parents were already attending William Street with Aldo for couples counselling, so they mentioned that they were struggling, she was struggling, so he suggested she come to me. So in that session, when I meet teenagers, and I like to often, if the teenagers have got buy-in and they want to come, then I'm happy
Mm,
to see them with the parents and the teenager initially. And then when I have the teenager on their own, I try to learn a bit about the teenager, who they are, what school they
mm,
go to, their friendships, their hobbies. And then in this case, I started asking about her family a little bit. And what came out was that she was the oldest, but her mother had breast cancer 4 years, diagnosed with breast cancer 4 years
mm,
earlier. So she would have been about 11 around that time. And she just stepped up to help her dad to manage the rest of the family. And they did not know what the outcome was going to be of this treatment of the
mm,
mother. And then when we talked about, and then I do a mapping of the anxiety. When did it start? What
mm,
happened? And it was really interesting that we could both see, once we actually looked at that anxiety began when her mother was diagnosed with breast
mm,
cancer. And at the end of the session, she said to me, that's amazing, because that psychologist that I went to see, she had 2 sessions with her. She said she knew nothing about me. She was just working
mm,
on CBT and anxiety, but she knew nothing and no background about this girl
mm.
and the context that this was happening in. So to me, mapping the genogram, whether it's a 14, 15-year-old, or whether it's an adult individual, like I've had another woman, she'd be in her 40s with anxiety, after a little while talking about what was happening after a couple of sessions. I said, can we have a look at your family? Oof, as soon as we went back to,
Mm,
she realized that her brother had been very bullying towards her, and it had been a very
mm.
difficult time for her growing up as a teenager. And those connections, I think, are like aha moments for the client as well.
Yeah,
And I think what it does is it makes them realize that they're not mad. There's not a big problem with them. It makes more sense as to how this became and generated into such an issue.
yeah,
Yeah, so
I love that, Anne. So it sounds like mapping the context for your clients is kind of a pivotal moment where they can start to see their context, but you also learn more about the context as
mm,
well. And so, did you mention genograms as a main tool that you use, or
yes, yes.
timelines? Like, I'm
Yes,
keen to
timeline.
learn.
Oh, absolutely. I always use timelines a lot. Couples, I'll use timelines. So we'll work through, their time when they met, how long, how they married. But that has such an impact. And each incident, when a child was born, what was happening, what was going on in their lives. Sometimes I'll use eco maps as
mhm,
well. So we used to use that a lot in social work, actually, when we used to do assessments in social work, we did eco maps. So I'd often use an eco map as well. So all of those are really good assessment tools, I think, and getting a sense, a wider lens on the issue, basically. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Mm.
love that.
Yeah.
I think Anne, because obviously we all love the wider lens, but do you think like that's like how you get buy-in? Like, because I'm thinking about my practice and trainees, and I'm often kind of speaking with people and training about if we can help people see themselves systemically, if we can help them see themselves as part of a system. It almost helps shift the focus from that person needs to change, that person fix my child. It just I don't know, like, is buy-in like a good way to describe it, or would you say it differently?
That's an interesting way of putting it, buy-in. Um, I think it's something that's actually you're doing in the room with the clients.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent, there's a certain level of well, you need the therapeutic relationship basically to be able to do it. So there's a level of trust
Mm,
with the therapist, and so it's interesting because I'm training at the moment, first year trainees, and they've never done systemic work. They've worked with individuals, and I keep thinking, how do I get them to understand how
yeah.
they have to look at the interaction patterns that are going on in a situation? So in this case, we have a mum who's on her own with a 15-year-old boy and a 11-year-old girl. And of course, there's the lifespan is impacting with
Mm,
this young man at 15 who is asserting himself and his independence. And of course, there's many arguments at home between him and his mother. And so this happens actually in the therapy room, you know. And I watch the trainees just sitting there, and I think, oh, that's interesting that they're not intervening, you know, they don't know how to, at this stage in their learning, how
mm,
to slow that process down and how to enter. So
mm,
Maurizio Andolfi talks about when do you enter into the system? And so you are actually, so I don't think you have to necessarily let the clients know about the system. You work with the system. And in
mm,
doing that, that's when they might get an understanding. It's not just about me, it's about, not about that, sorry, it's not about that person. There's me involved in this as well.
mm,
Um, One of my colleagues was telling me what she does sometimes is with a family, she'll get a ball of yarn and then she will talk about what's happening for maybe the teenager, and then they roll a bit of yarn on their finger, and then what's happening for the parent, what's your thoughts and feelings, and then they roll the yarn around their finger, then it goes to the next person, and then she says when you start pulling on that, the
mm.
whole starts reverberating, so it has an impact on the whole system. I thought,
Mm.
well, that's a really unique and visual way. And then in
Yeah.
this situation, she said the mother, all the yarn was going to her. And then she looked at it and she said, it's me, isn't it? I need to focus more on me. I don't need to focus on that teenager. I need to be looking at myself as well. So I think it's the tools and techniques that you might use. Sometimes I
Mm,
do it with family sculpting. Um, Sometimes it might be through they do art work together, or I say let's draw a shield about your family and your values and what you know about your family, what you would like to be in your family.
mm,
So I think it's the work you're actually doing with clients that has the system. Like I wouldn't be explaining it to them, but I'd
yeah.
be just doing it in the moment. Yes. Does that answer that?
Yeah, it really kind of gets me thinking about what you were saying earlier about that experiential approach that you really
Mm,
appreciated and being kind of in the process and in the moment.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Virginia Satir does it a little bit differently. Like she would say, like the other way to do it is through the thinking, isn't it,
Yep.
process. So sometimes she would say, like, there's a beautiful video clip of Virginia again another mother and a son, older son, and the mother goes to touch the boy on his knee, and he pulls it away, and you can see the frown on his face. And Virginia starts asking the boy, "What do you think your mother was trying to say to you when she put your hand on your knee?" And
Mm,
he said, "Oh, I think she's trying to control me, and so she's trying to quieten
mm,
me down." And Virginia would go, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm wondering, could it mean something else? Like, do you think it could be she's actually saying, I care about you?" And so
Mm.
she would introduce another thought or idea to the
Yeah.
client through that way.
Yeah.
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 I
Mm.
love
Beautiful.
I love those examples, Anne. I'm going to take you back. You said something that caught my attention that there's a moment as a therapist that sometimes you have to slow down and think really carefully about when you enter the interaction or when you enter the system. Can you tell me more about that, how that looks in your practice? Like, how do you find moments to slow down? Because I know that can be really hard when things are charging in that therapy room.
Yeah, look, it's not easy. I have to tell that message to myself all the time as well. Sometimes I think, oh, I've gone too fast. I've gone too fast. Um, I think it's taking that step back, um, not, I think, buying into or getting sucked into the anxieties of the family,
Mm.
but being able to interject at a point in a very gentle way. When things are starting to escalate, I find I've got to slow that process down. Or what I will do is I hear something that's really interesting and they've gone on further, and like to just come back to this point because I thought that was really interesting. And what I often find I do is I'll write a phrase on my page on my notes. Oh, that's an interesting phrase. So I write it down and I go come back to it. And so it's about tracking in your mind because you can't literally stop clients in the flow. It's sometimes very difficult. For me, it's waiting for a pause, and then I will go back and come in and I say, I think this is really important place for us to do some work with. Um, yeah, so do try to do it that way, but
I
it's
can
not.
hear so much intentionality there, in your thinking, you're thinking about what you might highlight or slow down again. You're really aware of yourself in that moment about where you're getting caught up in it. And then it's like an intentional step. And I think, that's one of the hardest parts sometimes is to find those moments of thinking behind the scenes in a family session.
Yeah, yeah. You're using everything, aren't you, when you're in a session? You're using your knowledge base that you have. You're using your experience. You're using your own life experience. You're using
Mm.
how you experience and feel in the moment in that time. So it's all of that. You say, I would say it's a head, heart, gut, hand.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
Mm.
because the head is your thinking, the heart is your compassion and empathy for the person. Your gut is like, oh, this is important. I know this is important. I need to do something with this. And for me, the hand is then doing something
Mm.
in
I've
that.
written that down. I'm going to post-it
Me
note that on
too.
my wall.
Me too. And I've got to say, and it's obviously like experience and training. Um, you make it sound, well, I don't want to say easy because it's not easy, but you make it sound like it flows, kind of smoothly. And so I just wanted to acknowledge for people as well that you are bringing that wealth of experience with how you're pulling things together. And then I was going to ask, like, with all of that experience, like, what do you still find challenging?
Hmm. Do you know what I find more challenging working with some individuals? I find it easier to work with more than one person in the room, but I find it more difficult to work with one person in the room. And the
Mm.
most challenging one would be the client who I find has got an entrenched way of thinking about the situation. And there doesn't seem to be any ability to be able to shift that thinking,
Mm.
move from that. And there's a personality flavor in there as well. And
Mm.
I do have a gut reaction to that. I find that difficult. I don't really want to work with this person, actually. I don't know if I am going to like. I remember Jeff Young doing a presentation at a conference talking about certain clients, and he said, "You know that client who cancels and you're relieved that they're not coming." I do think, we're human beings first and
Yeah.
foremost, meeting another human being. And is there a connection? And if there isn't a connection, I'm
Mm.
not sure you're going to be able to do the work. So I've often stopped and said, I'm not sure if I'm the right person here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's more an individual person that I'll have difficulty with. I don't have difficulty with. I had this father and adult son one time yelling at each other in the session, and really, particularly the dad, he goes off and he escalates up and up and up, and the young man goes with him up and up and up and up. And I said, you have to stop. You cannot start yelling in this room. And I'll tell you
Mm.
why. The one good reason is because the person next door is a person who does hypnotherapy, and her room is really quiet. And we've just got this thin wall in between, and you're going to really disrupt their session by screaming at each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can interject in those, or like a teenager who's going off,
Yeah.
I can calm them. But I've got other people in the room, you see, to be
Yeah.
able to somehow the other person in the room helps to monitor it a little bit. But when
Yeah.
it's an individual, I suppose it's me and that person, and then whatever's going on between us that isn't, it hasn't got a good fit somehow.
And I think when I think about your experiential background and when you talk about process and finding the place to sort of interject gently, um, it gets me thinking there's a lot more to work with when there's more than one person in the room.
That's
And
right.
when there's more than one person in the room and a lot more to work with, then you have those, I guess, like I would say, like multiple perspectives that can sometimes help individuals shift and see things differently.
Absolutely, you're right, Leonie, which is much harder to do with an individual. I mean,
Yeah.
I can do that with an individual by using like empty chair or
Yeah.
asking if the person was here, what do you think they would be saying about this?
Yeah.
But it's that person who won't do the work, who's just got
Yeah.
this intense rage, unwilling to take any responsibility for their
Mm.
part in the process that I get very stuck with.
I
I
think
don't
we all
know
do.
how to shift that. Well,
Yeah.
it's timing. I think it's a lot of timing as well. I remember
Yeah.
one man actually, as an individual, did come to me, and it was interesting because I said to him, I wonder if you're ready for change because this is going to require you to do something quite differently in your life.
Mm.
And he said, Oh, I never have even thought about that. And I said, Well, maybe you need to go away. And he was actually, I did connect with him and felt really had a relationship. And he said, You know what? I will go away and think about that. And
Mm.
then he contacted me and he said, No, I'm not ready. So he didn't return. Yeah, so it was interesting too. So that's a bit like when you were asking, Leonie, how do you get in a bind? That was not necessarily systemic, but for every person who comes to therapy, I think sometimes they have the expectation that you are going to provide the answer or do the change, but
Mm.
it's actually themselves that has to do something. And sometimes individuals don't understand that, whether they're individuals or families. They expect you to fix the problem, fix the child, fix
Mm.
that person, fix my partner.
Mm.
Then everything will be fine.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like our clients sometimes invite us into a position that's not necessarily how we see ourselves wanting to be positioned.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and that's with couples, it's easier to then ask questions about what they need to be doing differently, not what the other person may do,
Mm.
but what do you think you could do? And that is when I do a bit of that psychoeducation of, it's really more about not changing the other person, but you're going to have to look at changing something in yourself, even if it is just a different way in thinking about the
Yeah.
issue. And so that's how I might explain a system to them in that way.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm,
which goes back to your earlier question, really, about how
mm,
you describe a system to clients. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And I can just hear how this systemic frame has shaped your kind of clinical practice and how you
Mm.
understand yourself in the therapy room and how you understand families that come to you. I'm imagining that passion is the reason that you got so involved with the Australian Association of Family Therapy. Am I right?
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, I think yes, I've always volunteered. I've always thought right from the start, I thought working systemically was far
Mhm.
more effective than just working with an individual. So I started beginning teaching pretty quickly. Little places like at a community health centre. I worked for another training organisation that were teaching psychotherapists, and they had a unit in there on systems and working, and so I was asked to do that part of the unit. And so that was not just theory, it was actually clinical based training. So
Mm.
I've always then that passion took me into training. And then I started training at William Street Family Therapy Centre in the early 2000s. And at that point, a bit mid 2000s, Aldo actually decided to start up the West Australian Family Therapy Association again. So I got involved in that. We put on symposiums, we ran professional development workshops locally. And then, of course, then AFT started to think about becoming a national body and not just the different
Mm.
states. Because, of course, you had Queensland,
Yeah.
QAFT, and WAFTA and VAFT. And so, yeah, so then one of my colleagues was at the time representing WA in that. And then she had some personal issues in her own life and said, look, I really can't take this on. And I said, you know what? I'll have a go.
Mm.
So I went over and sort of represented WA and but didn't leave basically. So I was the state rep there for many, many years,
Yeah.
and still ran lots of professional development events and conferences and was involved in committees for the conferences.
Mm.
Then I took a break because running actually facilitating a conference and being convening a conference is a lot of work. And so I
Yeah.
was a bit tired. And my dad had died that year as well.
Mm.
So I really wanted to have a bit of a break.
Yeah.
Um, and then we decided, the few of us here in Perth, that we would actually try to find out what was happening in AFT because the conferences hadn't occurred. And so that's when I put my hand up and nominated to be president. And to tell you the truth, I really didn't care if I didn't get it either, you know. So I had no real investment in it. I thought, yeah, I'll have a go. I'll put my hand up. Um, yeah, and it is interesting. It's been really helpful in actually in Perth, we are very isolated geographically from the eastern
Mm.
states border. And I never went to annual conferences while I was young. I had young kids. I didn't have the finances and the time to attend annual
Mm.
conferences. One of my colleagues was saying, "Oh, Anne, you should go to one of the family therapy conferences in Australia. It's fantastic." But I didn't because I really couldn't afford it. So then eventually I started going and I thought, yeah, this is really what it did for me was energized me. It was
Mm.
mixing with the same kind of people, the same way of thinking, exposed you to new ideas. So I enjoyed that. And with the role of president, it's even expanded it a bit more in that, you know, I think, oh, I don't know about the Family Systems Institute in New South Wales, and then there's you in Queensland, and
Yeah.
you know, really know at a deeper level. You know, Jen McIntosh at Bouverie. I did know Sophie a lot because Sophie was very involved in
Mm.
VAFT and AFT. So that I love the networking part
Yeah.
of the role and meeting different people. And I think that expands your knowledge base as well because you talk and
Mm.
with each other about your ideas and systems and the work you're doing. So yeah, it's been interesting. I have enjoyed it. Did
And just listening to you talk, I wonder if there's some overlap because one of the things that we're really interested in is also that sense of connection and sort of nationwide community. But we are a really big country, right? So even so where we are in Southeast Queensland is really long way from, kind of Adelaide and Melbourne. And so this sense of how do we come together? How do we keep good energy, as a family therapy community? That's something that I was just kind of like, taking out of what you were saying. Is that like a good fit?
It is, and it's interesting, isn't it? It's how do you become a national body as well,
Mm.
with that in that vast country. Um, my personal view is that it has to be two-way. We're very fortunate with COVID in one level because it introduced us to this online, and we've all
Yeah.
become much more familiar with it and willing and open to it. And so this has been good in terms of being able to run meetings at a national level because when I was state rep, we'd have 3 in-person meetings a year, which really wasn't enough
Mm.
to really actually progress the association. But now that we meet monthly online, that makes a
Yeah.
difference. We are also, but I do think that within your local areas, doing in-person events is really important. And
Mm.
I'm trying to encourage it, and I keep talking about it at conferences or different places about,
Mm.
we'll support you if you want to do something in your area to bring like-minded people and have a sense of community
Mm.
of systemic therapists. Um, so it's not easy because it does require a bit of work, and it is a voluntary position then that you're
Mm.
going to take time out of your own work to do something. But it's very rewarding as well. It's a sense
Yeah.
of when you actually achieve that. Um, we are fortunate that after the last conference, I mean, the first 2 years in this role was really just really getting all the governance worked out. We have that now, and we're quite solid, have a solid base, I think, and secure. And Michael Hunt, who's my mentor through this role as president, he's always been giving the analogy that I'm flying the plane and building it, or we're flying the plane and building it at the same time. But for me, the analogy now is like we're a ship sailing in calmer waters.
Mm.
And it feels now we've got time to bring our head up and have a look. So we are doing a meeting, all stakeholders around the country. We did an in-person in Adelaide earlier this year, and I
Mhm.
ran a workshop introducing systemic mapping to Relationship Australia clinicians, and that was really lovely. But it was really lovely having a members' dinner and meeting people in
Mhm.
person. And again, energy was revived, and people are excited. So that was really helpful to do that. So then the vice president said, because Joanne from PACFA. She says she goes around the country as the CEO of PACFA, meeting people. And the vice president, we need to do that, Anne. I said, do we? So we are. So we're coming to you in September to Queensland to
Yeah.
meet with the trainers there. We're going to Sydney. Then
Yeah.
later in the year, we're going to Melbourne and Perth. And we want to just create connections and relationships with the training organisations. What is
Mhm.
the relationship between AFT and the training organisations? And then we're going to have a dinner with the members. So we meet the members as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really, really interesting to do. That's to be able to actually meet people in
Yeah.
person. And yeah, at those places, I will encourage anybody to do anything they want to do. If they want to run a symposium, if they want to run a workshop, and they want to partner with AFT, we'll support it
Yeah.
and provide assistance where we can.
Yeah.
So it's the members who keep it alive. We can only do so much because we just haven't got all the time. We're limited time and capacity. But if everyone did a little bit, then that would help, I think, to revive and
Yeah.
have a sense of a community of family therapists
Yeah.
in their state or in their local area. Yeah.
So, and I just kept thinking while you were talking, you had the ship metaphor, the ship in calmer waters. And then I was picturing it a bit like a cruise ship that, your visits around to everyone and bringing the good energy and having the member dinners. Is that because I was going to say, what direction do you want the ship to go in? But then I was thinking more, it's how do we want the ship to sail? And we want to have really good energy on the ship and we want to have really good connection. And we want it to, this is just my perspective. You feel free to agree or disagree, but we want to have such a good vibe on the ship that we get other people who want to come and get on our ship because I would
Mm.
love to see our membership grow.
Yes, yes, it is important. So it is a struggle of how we do that, which will be the next chapter, I think, in
Yeah,
terms of like the direction really is that we are thinking, with our strategic plan now that we will try to professionalise the association. So the first step has been reviewing the constitution. So that's where we're going to a company limited by guarantee. So we will then be able to have a board and then employ a CEO. Now, I think that I've been really behaving like a CEO rather than just a president.
mm.
I talked to Takeshi Tamura, who was the president of the Asian Academy of Family Therapy when I first started, saying, "Oh, what do you do, Takeshi?" He says, "I
Yeah.
don't have to do anything." He said, it's just an honorary position. It's Viviana, she does all the work."
I know that you were doing a lot, Anne. It's more than just an honorary position here.
Running around like mad doing this. This is a daily tasks. So, but I think once we have that CEO, this is when it can be that the board will be clear about directing the CEO, and it will have experienced family therapists who know where they want to go. So we want to professionalize the family therapy. That is going to take many years, really, to do that. So I think that is the direction we are going to be going into. And I think it is significant and important to do. We have to do a lot to actually have us recognised in government, registered by NDIS, Medicare, all those other bodies. So it is a bit of work. And then you have to, advocate and work with politicians. It's not impossible. It is possible. There's other people have done it. There's a what is it called? There was this association that I went to recently that Jason invited me to, and the International Society for Psychological and Social Approaches to Psychosis. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. But one of the women there was the CEO of Community Mental Health Australia, and they've got narrative therapy recognised in the mental health field as an intervention and treatment, but she wants to get open dialogue recognised and contemporary approaches. So that's like what Harleen Anderson is doing, like she
Yeah.
does contemporary conversations with
Yeah.
clients. And she's seen the health minister. And I
Mhm.
thought, wow, there you
Oh,
go. She's done it. We can do it.
I
Yeah.
love that, Anne. I just think too, it's almost like what you were saying about when you got exposed to this way of thinking, it was so helpful in your clinical practice. And that's what Leonie and I see too, with our trainees coming through is everyone loves this framework and it's so helpful, particularly with the complexity, I guess, in the community and the clients that we see. I would like to also share with you, I love the AFT conferences. I call it my cozy corner of systemic practice because you go to these conferences and you're hearing clinical examples, and it's just the way you think. So I'm super excited to hear that the IFTA, the International Family Therapy Conference, is also coming to Australia next year. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to sit in an international cozy corner as well.
Yes, I think Laura, and we met the other day for the first time with William Hebert, he's the president of IFTA,
mhm.
and so yeah, and I also meet online actually with the other presidents, like the American one. I meet with the Italian Umberta Telfner, and I've met Martin Nice a few times at the Asian Academy of Family Therapy. They're with the European Family Therapy Association. The Canadian guy is full of energy and excitement. So Andrew, and so we meet now and then, about once
Yeah.
every 2 months. So that's really helpful. But I've never been to an IFTA conference, so I don't know what they're like, the Congress. And they were telling me, oh, sometimes not so good with some of their papers, and it's kind of like rush, 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 rush. We've decided we're going to have a day and a half of just sort of Australian mini conference before the IFTA one. And I just found out that the part that Australia can have in the IFTA is going to be a good welcome to country. We really want a really long welcome to country. So we recognise First Nations people to all the international visitors. And the other one is that we're going to invite keynote speakers for a panel to talk about Australia and family therapy in Australia.
Mm.
But besides that, we don't have any input. So the next bullet I'm going to suggest to please can you put in many papers so we get a lot of the
Mm.
Australian content into the IFTA conference. They will make the decision, of course. They will obviously have their selection
Mm.
panel who will decide what papers. But I'm going to encourage everyone to put papers into that. And the day and a half one we have with the Australian part, I think would be nice if it's more workshops than
Yeah.
papers being presented. So it's clinical based workshops, and we'll have a conference dinner. Um, so,
Oh,
and
I'm
then,
excited.
yeah,
I'm super
encourage
And
excited.
people.
and I have been to an IFTA conference.
Oh,
I
good. Tell
I
me,
was
Leonie.
lucky enough to present a couple papers actually at the conference in Japan. And one of the reasons I'm super excited for this is my experience was one of like diversity of perspectives and cultures, that came with a real openness and community spirit and respect. And
Mm.
I absolutely loved seeing how different parts of the world, different family therapy ideas had kind of taken off, but just the atmosphere of collaboration and openness. I'm really hoping to see that again in Adelaide.
How long ago was that, Leonie, that you went to
That was
that?
2024.
Oh, good. Okay. All
Yep.
right. Okay. We were meant to go to Bergen in Norway. That was what our plan was so that we could actually connect with them. But unfortunately, because of the war in the Middle East,
Mm,
we all decided that we were not brave enough to go. And I didn't want to go and have a really long flight either. So we gave up on that. We will go to the Asian Academy in a couple of weeks, and again,
yeah.
we'll promote IFTA there because Asia is so close to us. And the Asians,
Mm.
they're very passionate about family therapy and very
Mm,
interested and open. So it will be lovely to see if we can
yeah.
invite many of them. But even like Umberta from Italy said, I've never been to Australia, she said. And so maybe I'll come. So that will be great. So yeah, but I just got to, I think it's good to meet the international visitors,
Yeah.
but I think it's our opportunity to showcase Australia
Yeah.
as much as possible as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I love that. And as our conversation comes to the end, I was thinking all about our conversation. We've talked about your clinical work. We've talked a lot about AFT as well. I guess I'm wondering, is there something that you want to share with the systemic family therapists listening, whether they're early in their career, they're just kind of dipping their toes into systemic practice? What's one thing that you think would be really helpful for them to think about and a few tips and tricks for them to take away?
That's interesting. I think first and foremost, you have to be yourself. You have to be
Mm,
real. Like I remember when I first started working in child and adolescent mental health, and I had been very experienced by then, 30 years of work. And one of the supervisor who was a peer supervisor said to me, "You're not really a child and adolescent mental health worker." And I was thinking, I don't know what she means by that.
mm,
And I was thinking, that's right. No, I'm Anne Holloway, first and foremost. And then I do this kind of work.
mm,
And whether it's, systemic therapy, whether I'm learning how to work in a child and adolescent mental health team. So I thought that was an interesting thing to say because I thought I don't want to be a child and adolescent mental health
mm,
worker. That's not my label. So I think it's about first and foremost being yourself and being a human being who's interested in other human beings. So that helps with your curiosity.
mm,
And I think you have to um, practice, keep practicing, practice, practice, practice. Have a go, experiment. Um, don't feel disheartened if something doesn't work. Any intervention or doesn't work, you can talk it through with the family at the next session. You can talk through your own relationship and therapeutic relationship. I think that is the most important as well, is the sense of self and your therapeutic relationship. And as Irving Yalom says in his book, The Gift of Truth, to him, the therapeutic relationship has to be talked about. Like you talk about it in the session. You don't just guess it and say, yes, I have a therapeutic relationship. You ask, how is this for you? What's happening here that
mm.
works, what doesn't work? How are you finding the therapy? Um, and he will do that on a regular basis in his
Yeah.
sessions, which I really like.
Yeah.
So I think it's perseverance as well, and also just believing in this kind of work. Um, if you don't believe in it, you're not really going to take it on board because it isn't easy. It is difficult to have more than one person in the
Mm,
room, and I have seen clinical psychologists in their training really struggle with it. And what I've said to them is that it's no different. You can do individual psychodynamic work with your client, with another client there who's witnessing it. Then you've got to learn how do you bring the other person into
mm,
that because you do still do that kind of work. So yeah, it's just encouraging them that to keep practicing, and somehow it comes. You've got to. It takes years to learn, I think, and it takes years to integrate it into
mm.
yourself that it just becomes natural. but at first it won't be. And you need supports, resources, supervision to help you along the way with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I just loved listening to that and even just kind of the warmth in your voice when you were talking about, it's okay to make mistakes and you can talk about the relationship and get supervision. And I just really love that because I know like it is a different skill set, say from my initial training in psychology and when I talk with people who get a bit nervous about more than one person in the room. But I just was really hearing that we don't have to be perfect and we don't have to be positioned as experts and we can collaborate and work on building that
Yes.
relationship.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think if you're more relaxed, it's easier than coming in with a lot
Mm.
of anxiety. I've got my training group next week, and we have offered the family to come in and have an extra session if they want. The 15-year-old boy, when we mentioned it, he goes, "No." I thought, well, he was very clear. And in some ways, I don't want them to come in next week because this gives me the opportunity to play with the trainees, and I'm going to get them. We're going to role play with the family. We're going to work as co-therapists, and I'm just going to say, do whatever you want to do. No one's going to be watching you. Just have a go and experiment and play,
I love
and
that.
and then we can just have fun with it rather than taking it all too seriously. But I think
Yeah.
that creativity, that fun, that play really helps as well. Because of course, they're all really anxious to get it right, and it's very, very serious, and
Mm.
don't want to harm people, which is understandable. You don't want to harm anybody. But if you yourself and you have a good relationship, at any point, if you've got a relationship good enough for with a client that can say, "Oh, that was challenging," or "I found that very difficult," or can even come back after a session.
Mm.
I've had a psychologist come back and say to me, "Wow, I was so shocked when you shared a little bit of something about yourself, because we're not allowed to do that."
Mm.
I thought, wow, that's amazing. I'll only share it if I think it's actually going to be helpful. It's a bit like in the reflecting team,
Yeah.
if you share an experience that you've had as an offering, as a gift to the clients.
Mm.
To me, there wasn't any harm in that, but it was quite
Mm.
interesting that she had that view that that was really a no-no. But
Mm.
I really appreciated her coming back and talking to me about it.
Yeah.
And isn't
Yes,
that the essential part of, like you were saying earlier, entering the system is we have to think about our relationship with our clients and with the families we work with as an integral part of the work because we are entering their system and entering their interactions.
that's right. That's right, Laura. Yes.
And thank you so much for this conversation. I have learned a lot. I've got my post-it note ready to stick on my wall as well. But I just want to say thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Oh, look, thank you. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed it because we don't often get opportunities to stop and reflect. I should say I don't get many
Mm.
opportunities and reflect about my practice. So this was helpful in that way for me to really think it through. So thank you for inviting me and doing this podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Anne. And I'm really excited we got to talk about family therapy in Australia as well, and that hopefully lots of people will get to hear the conversation and get excited and submit all those abstracts for the IFTA conference.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Thanks,
All right.
Leonie. Thanks,
Thanks.
Thanks,
Laura.
Anne.
Bye.
See ya.
So, welcome back, everyone. Laura and I would love to share some of our reflections with you. And Laura, is it okay if I start today just kind of thinking about intentionality?
I love that. Yep.
Yep. So the one of the things that really struck me about the conversation with Anne was intentional practice and being thoughtful and the metaphor she had of how she weaves in the head, the heart, the gut, and the hands. Um, and I also loved though the kind of gentle permission to practice and not have to be perfect and to, incorporate some creativity and just resting all on that bed of belief in systemic practice as an approach.
Mm. I love that too. And that idea of the therapeutic relationship and thinking relationally in our
Mm.
practice. I also really love the AFT piece, the thinking about the Family Therapy Association, and I could hear the energy that Anne has around the next
Yep.
steps of the association, which I'm excited about. And this opportunity with IFTA coming up next year in 2027 in
Hmm.
Adelaide, and thinking about how as a community we can come together and, like I said in the podcast, enjoy a cozy corner moment where
Yeah.
like-minded people come together and think systemically and hear about each other's practice. So, yeah, I'm excited for where this community is heading in Australia, and I really encourage everyone to jump on board the AFT train and even come to the little info nights that they have and the
Yeah.
PD presentations, just so, yeah, we can continue growing this framework of thinking.
Because all those little bits of energy can keep adding up and adding up until we, kind of get that beautiful, ongoing, great energy in the family therapy community.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Mm.
thanks to Anne. Hey, what a great conversation.
Yeah, that was really great.
And should I try our catchy jingle again, although I can't quite remember the exact words? I think it was something along the lines of, let's keep hearing the systemic stories.
Or was it, I feel like there was the word flowing was in there. Was it let's keep the systemic stories flowing?
Perhaps. Let's run with
Well,
that.
well, let's run with both, and maybe we'll get some feedback on which one our listeners prefer.
I love that. Thanks, Leonie. Talk
All
soon.
right. Thanks, Laura. Bye.